Okay, we can settle in. There are lots and lots of presenters and presentations that come by with credentials and qualifications in good technology, good enterprise, and every once in a while we get the real deal. Somebody who is an ace across the board and has the credentials that go back across many disciplines, many enterprises, and then have gone the distance to deliver a company that's very successful and also based in the technology. Since we're going to hear that story in detail here, it doesn't make sense for me to tell it and then for Mel to tell it again. Here's Mel.
Thank you. It's an amazing honor to be here. I really believe this is the founding home of industrial robotics. I came out here 17 years ago to see NREC and see Detmer, the impressive Case New Holland harvester equipment, some of those early things that Red has been involved in, and just blew me away and really inspired me to, hey, this can really be feasible to have in a field, making a difference in agriculture. I was raised on a farm in the middle of nowhere in southern Alberta. Ranch farm. We raise a lot of hay for the cattle. 18 hours a day driving equipment in a circle. Very motivational to get out of those mind-numbing jobs, get an education. And so I was in a very small school. I missed probably 65 days my senior year driving in a circle in a tractor, and decided to pursue getting into robotics and to try to really eliminate those kind of things that a human mind should not be spent on. We were created for much higher things. So went to Utah State University and started doing robotics there, worked on some Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and ultimately John Deere Robotics there. And John Deere said, hey, we're going to production. We want a production company to partner with. And so I spun out, took about 2 professors, 5 students, and we started doing production robotics for John Deere. And the Orchard tractor was the what they wanted to do. Still not on the market. So first year, we started running on this product. We had an interesting meeting with some liability attorneys as they talked about the brilliant farmers who have disabled safety systems and wrapped themselves around a PTO shaft, sued the company, still made money even though they disabled safety, and that and a variety of reasons shut down that program after the first year. So I started a company, believe in me, here we go, and within a year we are headed for the wall. Luckily we had done some overtime hunch projects. Hey, let's go automate some orchard mowing, some golf course mowing, those kind of things. And someone else got some interest. We missed our near-death experience and we're able to keep going. And so we now have a proving ground about 100 acres up on the side of a mountain where we test everything from mining trucks, material handling robots, military vehicles. And really, my objective was to build something that was enduring, that I would want to shuffle into at 70 years old and want to be there. And I haven't seen that a lot of scenarios have turned out well for the employees. And so this is my official survey. 94.3 of the employees that I've talked to in companies that have sold or IPO'd seem less happy. And so although it's not a very common model that you hear a lot of hype about, just trying to build a great company was my model. I went to a company last year and they very quarterly earnings priority throughout all their decision making, and they had about 100 million in the bank and they were laying off 50 engineers. I'm going, what is going on? For having creative, brilliant people and having all that money in the bank, what are you doing? So I went and talked to him, and he said, well, if we spend that money on R&D, product development, it'll hit our P&L, our stock will drop, and this person that we don't want, this company that we don't like, will come in and buy us. And so we are laying off very innovative, brilliant engineers, and we have $100 million in the bank. And those kind of decisions, those kind of quarterly short-term thinking just drove me crazy. And so my objective is I want to build something great, and there are plenty of other models that work out great, and this is just the path that I've chosen. I really believe that they're trusting me to keep it an environment where they really can thrive and enjoy the journey. And I really do think it's about the journey. And so the general press out there typically talks about the big flip artists or serial entrepreneurs who make a ton of money, start another one, make a ton of money, and there isn't a lot of education or excitement about just building something slowly that has a lasting impression in the market. I really like what Mark Cuban said, that, hey, if you don't have a passion, then you need to find a business where you can get that passion. And so if you've got an exit strategy where you're really trying to just get the money, you're not going to have that endurance to get through the garbage, because it comes, the pain will be there. You're not going to be as successful if this is what you eat, drink, and sleep. And so it will be painful. One of the neat things I discovered in reading biographies about successful people came from Branson's books. And it really was clear that no matter who you are, where you're at, with how many numbers of zeros you have in your business, you still have the same gut-wrenching pain. You still have the bet the farm, like with Red on the DARPA challenge, putting it all out there, doing everything you can, mortgage whatever you have. It doesn't matter whether you're a 100,000, a million, or a $5 billion company. If you're on the entrepreneurial bus and you have the passion, then you're going to keep doing those things. And M. Scott Peck said, and this was, I just saw this 2 weeks ago, but it really brought home to me what had happened when I read Branson, that once you accept and understand that it's going to be painful, then it gets a lot less painful. And I won't say that it's no longer difficult, but the moment you understand, if I'm on this entrepreneurial bus, it's going to be painful, and there's going to be these roller coasters, the thrills, and also the gut-wrenching near-death experiences. Once you accept that and realize that you're on the bus for the long haul, it does get a lot better. So what does the journey look like? I saw this, I thought, haha, that's funny. But then I started to recognize some of the turns there and realized, oh, that's me. But really, the business book recipes really give you that false impression that you follow these 5 principles and here you go. This is your key to success. And that really caused some discomfort for me, because, hey, I'm following these, I've got my bookshelf full, and I've gone through all of those books, understand the principles, and I'm applying them, and what in the world is going on? Because they didn't tell me this was going to happen. They didn't tell me about that turn, that turn, and that turn. And it really is the reality. And so as you read people who've been through it and who are successful enough to be honest and not just tell you the straight curve stories, you really will, like in a Branson book, you will see and read about the gut-wrenching roller coaster, because that's really what it's like. So as a company, if we're going to try to be sustainable over the long haul and not just flip at the moment the opportunity comes to sell, how do we do that? And it seems like, as we look at some of the best entrepreneurs in the world being venture capitalists, if they are the best in the world and they are selecting these companies and opportunities and coaching them, why is it that they're only at 20 to 33%? If that's the case, then if I don't have a diversity plan, I'm in trouble, because if the best in the world, I don't know where I'd rank myself to them, but I better be diversified if I'm going to have that sustainability. So our diversity is really to build common building blocks across these vehicle-related industries, and then leverage that. So when mining takes a downturn, I've got the ag, or if I've got the military, to sustain us through those downturns. But assuring that we're able to handle a downturn like in mining in 2008. At the Mine Expo in 2008, it was September 2008, they said things have never looked better. The mining demand in the resource demand in China and India is going to keep this industry just flying. And within 3 months, the mining company we were working with laid off 16,000 people at the mine we were automating, and they saw the biggest drop in the history of mining. And so if I would have followed the people who said, you have to focus, and I focused on mining, which was the one that was really flying millions of dollars of development money, I would have been out of business completely. I lost about $4 million in backlog in 3 weeks. And so, thank heavens, I had other business that was leveraging those same building blocks in other industries. But the key with focus and diversity is that you really have to enable that you've staffed so that they don't have people being distracted and bouncing between programs, bouncing between projects, not having the ownership of a product and a market to really put their arms around and assure that it's successful, be passionate about it and make it happen. So that is obviously a challenge. We are trying to grow like crazy right now. We need brilliant people like you. Haven't been able to find as many as we would like so that we really can assure that we have that sufficient staffing. Our bootstrapping strategy really started through doing research and development services. We said, if we're not going to take venture money, how do we do this? And we knew we could get SBIRs, we knew we could get big end users and big OEMs to fund our work, but not give us, well, I'll explain some of the challenges there. So that's where we started. We didn't want to take other people's money as far as an equity position, and so we started there. The next step was to get into the OEM partnerships where we would get licensing and royalties, and then ultimately, as you can see, we're just getting into it right now, our own products where we have more margin, we have more control. On the OEM side, there's really markets where it's tough to compete if you're not an OEM. For example, in ag, you look at the John Deere, Case New Hollands, they probably have 10 to 15,000 dealerships across the world. And so how do you make a dominant play in market share in doing autonomous tractors, for example? Very difficult. And so there are certain areas where OEM domination drove us more to a partnering, and then there's some areas, niche areas, where we feel like we should sell to the market ourselves. And so I'll talk to some of those. So the research and development, the challenge with this is people have the mentality in industry that if we own it, if we pay for it, sorry, we should own it. And so that's very difficult. You have no leverage. You don't have any IP that you're bringing to the table unless you license it from a university and are bringing that. And so you need to at least try to get the rights to leverage in other markets. And so work with a big OEM and say, fine, for your industry you can own it, but we get the rights over here. And joint ownership ideally. And that has worked well for us. And eventually you do have, as I said, over time we had enough IP gathered together where we had the leverage going to these OEMs where we could get the kind of licensing deals and royalties that we really need to have the kind of cash flow that's sustainable when you're in a downturn. Some thoughts on partnering. This has probably been the most powerful way for us to partner, and ironically it's through an academic, but Clay Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma really provides the recipe for small businesses to partner with big businesses. It's really the handbook in all of the reasons why they should partner with a small business. And the general premise is that, hey, big companies can't innovate, they've got all this inertia, this culture, that market is too small, that niche market that is really going to be disruptive, they're still working on the incremental improvements for what they currently sell. And everyone in innovation in a big company has this book on their shelf. And so this has made me millions of dollars in development funds because I have leveraged and quoted directly out of the book that they call their handbook for really protecting against these disruptive challenges that a lot of the big companies have faced historically. And the recommendation is, hey, you really need to proactively approach these kind of disruptive technologies with either partnering with someone, acquiring someone, or creating your skunk works somewhere that can really address that small niche market where the size of the market is exciting enough to them that they can stay focused on that technology instead of getting pulled back into the big meetings and service and supporting these other market pulls that are in the mainstream market. And I definitely owe Clay a hug because it's been very powerful. John Deere sat down with me probably 2002 and went through these principles with me and said, here's what we're trying to overcome and avoid, and these are the things that we're trying to accomplish by working with you, and really helped me understand. And as I've gone throughout industry, everyone has this on their shelf. It's their marching orders. It's the things that they need to do to make sure that they are continually innovating and staying ahead of the curve. And so I highly suggest, if you're thinking about partnering, that you really study this book and understand its principles, because they do. Some challenges in partnering with a Goliath. One of the things we've learned is the pendulum is always swinging between outsource and not invented here. And these big companies, if you understand that those are coming, that, okay, they're in this outsource mode, so they're working with you. If you understand that eventually that pendulum is going to come back, it helps you formulate your strategy to be effective, because there are financial swings and management swings that cause this to happen. It will not always be typically an outsource type mentality, and so you need to plan for that. There's no corporate memory. If you have a champion, you can count on him not always being there. You're partnering with a culture, and so as you look at a partnership strategy, get to know the company as a whole and talk to the people at dinner. What is this environment like? How do they treat you? What's the what are your management? How do they treat you? Those kind of things, because the champions will change, and you really are tied to that culture. And your champion may be there 5, 10 years, but it's going to change, and unless you've really gotten a good culture as a partner, it's going to be painful. And small business visibility and branding. This is a challenge if you're partnering with a Goliath. We've had, for example, we've had big demos where the night before the stickers that were on our electronics boxes disappeared and someone else's sticker got put on the front of it. We brought our t-shirts and they were immediately swapped out for a different color, and hats, because they don't want to be seen as not being the innovators, and that this small little company is the one providing the bling for their product. And so one of our contracts had they will not reasonably withhold the rights to tell the world about the products that you're coming out with. Well, after we developed the product, they're selling a bunch. We went to them and they said, well, why would we reasonably tell the world that you were the ones who innovated our product? And so they didn't let us. So be careful in the wording of your contract. That is not effective, I found. Have a little stronger wording. Some other thoughts on partnering. Creativity is really the key to negotiations and not techniques. If you have someone creative in your business, make sure you take them along for any kind of negotiations, because some of the things that we've come up with, there are some very interesting big company perspectives on what partnering should be like. This is being recorded. Let me see. One company said, hey, we work with you for 5 years. Those employees should become our employees after 5 years. You're like, where did this come from? And in Europe, with the way they have contractors and contract employees and things like that, it made perfectly sense to him that we should just turn our employees over to their employees after enough money was spent with us. And so you really have to have the creativity to come up with the scenarios that help them understand your perspective, that either you're not, they don't understand what it's like to stand in your shoes. And so you have to have the creativity to come up with the scenarios and say, you know what, this term in the contract, this term in the deal will kill us, and this is why, or it will destroy our innovation or our creativity. And I've found all the negotiation books I've read, creativity is what has really prevailed as far as having great deals, successful partnerships. And also, again, being creative and how can meeting the needs that you have meet their needs as well. And I can't stress creativity enough. And as you go into these negotiations, that you brainstorm and you find ways to generate the kind of ideas, but still, there's no getting around. You need an expensive attorney. Do not get a bad one, and do not get a cheap one. That is not where you should be being frugal. All right, and then as far as that 3-tier progression from services to partnering, our own product push, I'll just share a video of some of the things that we've done. This is a PackBot with a Kinect camera on it. You can see it's mapping, stitching, and then moving it around in an environment. That's more for bomb disposal. This is outdoor with stereo. Obviously has its shortcomings, but allowing for God's eye view for manipulation for bomb disposal. And then this is a vehicle driving around. The laser's obviously pointing obstructions, the path that the vehicle's traveling on. We won the robotic range clearance competition. This was as much a win in having the guts to do something you really can't afford and finding a way to make it happen with a lot of overtime hours. This was in the middle of the recession, and not a lot of companies participated, and it was more a willingness to take a risk that you could place and make your money back and be able to pay your employees. So the competition, if you're not all aware of it, it was clear all of the brush, grass, trees from an area, and then scan it for metal, and then dig up metal down to 1 meter deep. And it was a 3-day challenge, and we were able to win 1.25 of the 2 million prize money. This was the scanning vehicle that did the actual building of the map of where the metal was underground. This is a vehicle the LAPD has. This is used by their SWAT team, so if you illegally park in LA, not terribly technical, but saving lives. It's fun to be a part of that kind of stuff. We have backhoes at all the major border crossings in Israel that deal with the bad guys coming across with explosives. This vehicle was used in, a policeman was killed, shot and killed. They sent in this vehicle. It ripped apart the house wall by wall. It was shot 100 times. It kept coming until the guy gave up and ended it. So, nice to be a part of that. This is a little crazy. So as I talk about our own products, I'm going to talk about 2 that we push ourselves into the market. This is been called one of the stupidest ideas we've ever come up with, and it's a truck on a dog leash. And so the front vehicle has a string tied to it from the back vehicle, and you notice it doesn't cut corners. It actually can tell when the vehicle in front of it turned, and so it won't turn until it gets to that same place. And it's speed-based following, so as you slow down in cities, it cuts corners nice and tight so you can get around stop signs. When you speed up and go 60, 70 miles an hour, then they spread apart. And so we've had up to 10 vehicles driving 40 miles an hour in a convoy with one guy driving the front. And because it's holding tension, now there's a neat dissertation in here somewhere, you can back it up and drive it like a horse trailer backwards. We haven't done the 10, so that's where the dissertation would come in. How can you back up a string and back up 10 vehicles in a convoy? So this is a single vehicle, and so you can steer like a horse trailer. This is a 4-vehicle test before we sent these into Singapore. And so those are headed into Afghanistan. Those will be used for a very low-cost robotic convoy type solution where people are not exposed to the danger. This is just some bulldozing stuff back in '07, I think. Just doing full autonomous ripping with bulldozer. And this is mining trucks back in '07, I think. Yeah, this was '07, just doing full autonomous haulage. Let's see, and then material handling. And this is my favorite, but hasn't found the right war. We're still praying for one. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, slow motion. So just high mobility, independent flippers was kind of the unique approach to some of the navigation challenges where you needed dynamic pitch roll and yaw. And then this is the other product that we actually sell into the market, and it's Proving Grounds Automation. And so we have 3 of the top 4 automakers in the world and 2 of the top 3 ag producers in the world automating their testing. So as they do durability. Right now, one of the sites, you can only have a human in the vehicle for 30 minutes because it turns his liver into jello and his back into multiple pieces. And so there's a lot of human challenges keeping the work in there. It's not a fun job. And so up to 80 miles an hour, beating these things up on rumble strips. We do this in Europe as well as the US. It's a nice market for a variety of reasons. Fairly small, but big enough to be of interest to us. So the interesting thing about this truck on a leash thing is that you've got redundant sensing in it. You're not trying to do mean time between failures on a GPS signal and a laser signal and a road following signal. Something that's very cheap, something we could put out there right now and be confident that any exceptions like cutting the string would be safely responded to. System trials, ag for example, how do we transport multiple tractors across a public road into another field? I've cut the cabs off. These are the next generation tractors. And so an OEM paid us to demonstrate this for their CEO with multiple tractors hooked onto the back of a guy's four-wheeler or his pickup truck. You could pull a combine, 2 tractors, and very reliable. You're not going to have any kind of GPS failure cause the tractors to run into the middle of the oncoming lane. And we've done the robotics on the logistics and convoys, and then also for long hauls and mining where they're going, it's too expensive to put a train track in between this mine and this port. And so we have monster trucks going lots of miles, and it's not this short batch type work that makes sense, especially if it's public roads. If it's private roads, then more of a GPS-based solution is what we're doing. Proving grounds, as I mentioned, thousands of miles per month. It's not OEM dominated. That's the kind we like, where we're not going up against the monsters that have the kind of dealer network and support and distribution that we can't compete against. And it also gives us access and integration to new emerging sensors. So these automotive suppliers, hey, we want to test this new really cool camera or radar. We get to integrate those into our kits so that we can do the autonomous testing of those solutions, and then we get the visibility to them and can leverage those in other industries. And of course, it's an enclosed environment. They're trying to keep other people away from it for privacy reasons, and so ideal for vehicles moving at high speeds by themselves. So a human sits at a command center at these automotive proving grounds and watch up to, right now I think we have one guy watching 7 vehicles. Obviously the application determines how many vehicles can be run. We were terrified to learn that we had this automated tire testing facility, and found out that they would go home at night, shut off the lights, and come back, find out wherever it ran out of gas and refuel it and start it again. What? The specification was specifically, they sit in front of that, they're the oversight, they're the supervisor, that's why liability is not a big problem, and they were going home. So we have found that unfortunately they trust it more than us in a lot of scenarios. In ag, in this thought that it's going to be a security type camera system where the guy sits there and watch them, they get very bored. As long as these things perform, they are off doing other things, and you cannot count on that. So it's a nice thing that trust is being built, but it's terrifying as well. Some other thoughts on business. If you aren't going to sell or go public, I wouldn't give out stock. That leads to frustration. When am I going to get my cash out? Why aren't you selling? Shouldn't you sell to those guys? Pressure to do things that aren't the best for the company and the customer. I've found that it's also painful liquidating employees who do have stock. There are 2 different types of evaluation. One, where the companies who are trying to buy you what they think you're worth versus what can you really produce for an ROI on your P&L. And so the valuation that the employees typically want is what a monster billion-dollar company would want you for strategic reasons. You can't afford to pay off employees and liquidate them at those kind of valuations. It really hurts the company. I don't like ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans. They have to be proportional to salary, and you cannot differentiate incredible effort. And so you got this PhD, you got this bachelor's degree. The bachelor's degree guy is really in it for the company, really working hard, you cannot pay him any more than proportional to what you're giving to the PhD. You're all getting PhDs, so you don't mind, but. So for me, profit sharing made sense, where I give a proportion of profit to the employees based on the performance of the company, proportional to what what their contribution is to the bottom line of the company. And so that's how I motivate. Hire the best engineers is obvious. I've been very blessed to have some incredible people. I've also found that wise entrepreneurs find ways to minimize the downside of people's strengths. The most incredible people you have, those same strengths will haunt you. And so you have to find ways, whether it's the brilliant guy that's a jerk or the very risk-averse person, how do you offset that kind of risk-averseness when you're not dealing with safety, but more entrepreneurial type risk-taking? And so I found, for example, with engineers and PM, project managers, very risk-averse. If you're trying to run from a consensual model of the company, they don't want to take any risk. And so you wouldn't believe the resistance you have for a DARPA challenge or for a range clearance competition, because are you crazy? We have this dollar per hour work for hire project over here, and you're going to go and risk the farm. So you have to learn how to, one, accept that they are brilliant over here. That's important. Just because they're pushing back over here, I just need to position that and leverage those strengths appropriately. Agile and project managers. The Agile Manifesto says that the highest priority is to satisfy the customer. Unfortunately, project managers have the priority of on time and on budget, and those conflict. We really believe that Agile is the right development approach. We use it across the board in all of our product development. But it's difficult when you have these conflicts. Here's another one. The Agile Manifesto says welcome change in requirements. That is the absolute no for project managers. They must not. And so how do you, with these people, PMI certified, this is how we do things, how do you adapt to the change in requirements as a customer gets this in their hands, learns what they do and don't like, and you need to navigate that stream when you have someone who's definitely hardlining that, hey, we have a fixed price contract and this is what we need to do. I think there is plenty of opportunity out there. I think that in a lot of ways, for certain programs, we're trying to do too much. I really liked what Steve Jobs said when they were coming out with the iTunes. In one of the interactions with the press, they just went crazy. Well, does it do this? Do you want to add this? Steve Jobs finally said, wait, put your hands down. Listen, I know you have 1,000 ideas for all the cool features iTunes could have. So do we. But we don't want 1,000 features. That would be ugly. Innovation is not about saying yes to everything. It's about saying no to all but the most crucial features. And in robotics, it's then getting those crucial features to be reliable and to really make sure that that minimum viable product can perform consistently. And that's what's going to build the reputation of robotics and allow us to get our footholds into some industries where we really should be, and we aren't yet. So I don't think there is a shortage of opportunity. I think we get wrapped around, we need this ton of money to do the innovation. And this company, 37 Signals, has put out their approach in a book that I really like. And he said, instead of freaking out about the constraints, embrace them. Constraints drive innovation and force focus. Instead of trying to remove them, use them to your advantage. Constraints are often advantages in disguise. Forget about venture capital, long release cycles, and quick hires. Instead, work with what you have. You think about the DARPA challenge. If you had $10 million, how would that have come out compared to what you did? If you think about all the companies who've had that ton of money, they go into their room and they come out with a product that no one needs, versus the guys who just had a little bit, they had to get it out on the customers faster, they were able to play with it, give them feedback, they did some learning along the way, but then they had a product that the customer wanted and they didn't have the debt or the equity challenges that you would have in taking a ton of money up front. And so I found this to be very true. The thoughts on the future, I think Google has been positive for the industry. They have been pushing the OEMs, as you saw at CES. the automotive industry is trying to have an innovative story, and Google is pushing them faster than they want to go. It's helping us in the sensor spending as we look at what we were paying 5 years ago to what we're able to get some radars for now and some lasers. Very exciting. That is going to proliferate across all of the industrial markets that we're in. And the public acceptance, as people are talking to you, I'm sure, and me about robotics, they're getting excited about it. They'd rather be doing something else in the car. The farm kids that they're now putting satellite dishes in the tractors so that they don't get bored, they're begging the question of why are these people in there? Why isn't this out there yet? And Google is putting that in the forefront, and it's definitely going to help us as we try to get into more industries. I believe liability is still going to hold us back. And the exciting opportunity about that is that small companies that typically blast through that wall. In the ag industry, there was steering systems. Some universities, Stanford developed a great steering system for an ag solution for driving straight, just to minimize overlap for spraying chemicals and seeding, that kind of thing. And the big companies were like, way too dangerous. If that farmer doesn't have his hands on the steering wheel, what could happen? We're definitely going to get sued, and there probably isn't a market. So they spun out, and they proved the market, and then the OEMs came along. The OEMs would have been so much further along if they would have embraced that and been willing to take that liability risk, but they didn't. And so it's an opportunity for us small guys to develop product, willing to take that risk to prove out something we believe in, that we're passionate about, and that's how we'll get through these challenges. So in summary, it does take longer in a bootstrapping company to get product out there. You don't have as much money, and you have to take it a little bit slower, but it really does ensure that you stay in control of the culture and the environment, and that's what's important to me. I really think that the perspective of, you know what, we don't have all the money in the world, and we don't have all the resources and the best building and the best equipment, but it does, I found, lead to much more creative thinking and much more innovation. I don't think that we've got it figured out. I definitely have a ton to learn, and learned some great things today as I interacted with you and some of your professors. It's an amazing honor to be here, and make sure you enjoy the journey. It's not about the money. That's it. Any questions?
You mentioned that there were a few industries that you thought robotics should be in, but is not yet. Can you give us some examples?
That would be silly. Why would I tell you that? Let's see. Obviously, ag and mining are two that, for example, we've been in ag for 15 years, and there still isn't something off the shelf to buy that's full autonomous, and the mind-numbing jobs continue. So I think those are ones that we're working on, and that industry is working on, and we should have been there a long time ago, and a lot of it wasn't technical. So there's those two are definitely no-brainers. I think Baxter is going to make some exciting inroads in the manufacturing areas for the mind-numbing, low-fidelity type work. You look at the disruptive, the Clay Christensen type model, where you're bringing something in typically that's under-featured, less fidelity and finesse, and you have these monster arm makers that are charging hundreds of thousands more dollars. He is really positioning himself in a very disruptive mode where the cost point, you'd be silly not to throw that in a proposal if you've got an ARM proposal going in at those kind of price points. I think he's going to push that app concept, and he's going to find ways to disrupt those bigger dogs within 3 to 5 years. And as he refines that technology, I think he's positioning himself very well. I was very impressed as I played with it, and the simplicity at which you can make it do things. Anyway, it's definitely not going to cover 80% of the market right now. It's definitely not going to handle a lot of the things that it does, but that need to be done with the big arms, but it's definitely going to make some exciting changes happen in the marketplace. Yeah.
So with what happened in 2008, if you were to be, offered an opportunity like that again, what would you do differently?
What would I do differently? I'm definitely a bet the farm guy. I wouldn't change that. some of my shareholders would. Let's see. I think one of the challenges is with the bootstrapping is you're slower to product. You don't have enough money to run as fast as you would like. And what I would have done, we were trying to do too many corner cases for the solution. I would come back to that minimum viable product of what would provide value right now at the minimum. And if that's hauling rock from here to there and not handling all of the, well, what if this happens? And what if this guy comes driving like this? And what if that? Just block it off, get hauling rock, and we would have been selling in the recession versus, hey, we got this really cool thing, but it's only had 8 months on it. Are you sure you don't want to buy it? So as far as painful lesson for me, that's what it would be, is I would push back on the customers and say, that's all nice, but right now we're going to focus on the minimum that will provide you value, and then we'll add those corner cases as we go. So that's what I would do. Yeah.
So you're elected president of the United States.
Sweet.
What do you do as technology policy to make more good things happen?
Wow. Didn't expect that one. I like what I've seen as far as him arranging meetings with the innovators. I don't know if that's translating to really policy change, but I think
What policies should?
I'm a sucker for the competitions, the X Prizes. I really like the innovation and the ROI that you get for that. Crazy people like me and Red that are willing to bet the farm, lose our sleep, and really push the envelope of what's possible. So I would definitely encourage a lot more of that. And
You know there's a White House bureaucrat in charge of contests?
I did not know this.
It's amazing.
That's one of the big things that will come out this year out of the White House.
Huh. Well, that's the first thing I'm going to change.
They got a whole portfolio of it.
Good. Well, yeah, so I think that's a darn deep question. I'll have to email you because I like that. No, I'll have to think about it. But I think the contests are definitely something that has spawned an innovation. I think we could do better at opening up government contracting for more competitive bids versus who you know, or anyway, I think there's ways to get more of the creativity into some of those proposals and some of those programs. I'll have to ponder that. Bad answer, sorry. Other questions? Yes?
What's your opinion on like having teleoperated robots or having robots that are completely autonomous in the market?
I like it. All of the above. We have to do both. There are certain applications like in South America where they have mines up at 14,000 feet, but it's complex. It's not the right time to do full autonomous digging into a rock face. Let's do that teleop. Let's get a nice immersive interface and get those people off of the top of that hill where they're only allowed to stay for so many days. They get bogged down and tired, and they have a lot more accidents. And the weather can be so bad they can pick gravel off the road and put through your windshield. So it's not a place you want to be. And there are certain things that just aren't minimum viable product right now that should be teleop. That's my opinion. Yes?
What are some constraints that you face? And what are some times you like fought against them because of that?
Ooh. Think about making a t-shirt for my company to have you embraced your constraint today so that they stop complaining about the lack of free Google lunches that I keep hearing about. I think one example is just the minimum viable product. Instead of, hey, if only we could add in these other features. If you embrace the constraint and say, no, we're going to be far better off if we just get that minimum viable product out there working and really focus on nailing that instead of moaning the lack of funds to do everything you would want. We all love all the capabilities. We want to put more and more capability into it. But I think that's an example where I've found that you just can't weather the financial cycles unless you get something out there much faster.
It seems like all your products are products and not services. And one of the things I've observed is it seems like large companies often want to consume robotics as a service.
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about getting into that, or why are you all in products besides contract research?
Good question. I think at the industries that we're talking about, like mining, for me to provide a service, like in Indonesia, they're doing drilling by the foot. They're buying that as a service instead of buying drills, instead of having a contractor drill for them. For me to support that at my size, to get the kind of international support and service for, like in mining, the shovel goes down, let's see, how many, it's $1 million per hour that it's down. You are going to be liable for not performing your service and support to a certain level of responsiveness. That's not something that I can support at this time. We're definitely looking at it in proving grounds. It's a far better approach because you are now, it's not a union guy that's controlling your vehicle. We've had some sabotage. And so a service definitely is enticing, and we're going to push towards that. And so I think there's certain industry where it definitely makes sense, and we need to be actively pursuing it, and I think the proving grounds is where we're going to go first on that. Yeah, right.
If not the service route, maybe vertical integration into some production operation. You started on a farm,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you get 100,000 acres, and what you do best, and hay commodity and reduce price, something like that.
Yeah.
And you know, that kind of in a commodity market, you cut the price a little bit, and you're golden.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, I think we really risk thinking too small, and I think that that's an area where the moment you have that invariability of human labor involved, and you have a vehicle that can automatically do the work, there's so much value, and we found that customers typically won't pay that. You go to a mining customer and you say, hey, that's $1 million a truck for labor for, let's say, the Outback in Australia. 4 shifts, 24/7, about 180 per driver plus fly in and fly out, so you got about $1 million in labor. And so you say, hey, I'm saving you $1 million a year, 3 years ROI, you should pay, let's split this pretty fairly. They will not pay for the value. And so if you can provide a model where you're doing it by the foot, or you're doing the alfalfa crop or whatever, I think you get a much higher margin on the return.
But the other thing that it beats is that you get just leap right over all of those external considerations for what if I get wrapped around PTO,
Yeah.
and what about this, what about that. You're fundamentally selling whatever it is. I'll just say hay bales by the ton.
Yeah.
For the dollar.
Great point. And it's probably something that some OEMs are doing it in Europe, like cleaning and selling cleaning by the square foot. But I think the OEMs will be far slower to move into that kind of a model. But I think the highest margins would definitely be possible there. And you're taking that liability thing off the plate, which is huge.
Red Zone bids cash in sewers.
Huh. Handy.
Yeah. But that's still not that commodity that
Uh-huh.
product.
Yeah. Neat. Good idea.
How did you start your company? Do you have research idea back in university and then went out and started it, or you raised money and then did research?
The two things in parallel: the Chaos Robot, the walking track, built that out of Legos and then out of styrofoam. Took that to the government and got an SBIR grant. And then John Deere was really anxious to get going, and they said, hey, if there happened to be a company in Utah with your experience, we might just start funding some product development. And so the stars aligned, and I jumped out of the university in the cushy job of managing roboticists and took the plunge.
At any point were you at personal financial risk?
Woo. Oh yeah. I don't know what I can say on film, but yeah, I think the 2008 was definitely rough. And it's really, how many people do I keep? do I mortgage my house and keep 2 people that I feel are family and that are great contributors? So I did. So I liquidated everything, 401k, mortgaged my house, all savings, everything to keep every person that I could. And luckily I'm still here. It was bloody close, but we made it through, and contracts came when they needed to. We were definitely blessed, and now things are really going well. Yes?
So you talked about what happens when a company IPOs or whatever.
Yeah.
But a similar phenomenon happens when the founder leaves.
Uh-huh.
Do you have a plan?
Yeah, so I agree. I think there has to be the, what do they call that? Succession planning. And I think that's definitely wise and should be done. And my theory is that this culture will be strong and that we will breed the kind of people that have those same kind of ideals, and that will be a careful transition to someone with the same kind of objectives in mind, and not the flip it and make a bunch of money and run. I could have sold for about $23 million, I think, just a year or 2 before the recession, and my shareholders still not thrilled. But you think about going through that recession, and what would it have been like with a $1 billion company managing the kind of drawdown of staffing and decision making versus, would they have mortgaged their house to keep that extra 2 or 3 people? Probably not. So the priority for me is that I keep it in the hands of similarly minded people, and that is sure the objective. If I drop off too soon, we might miss the boat there, but because I haven't done the succession planning, I should. But
I could have predicted that.
I'm going to live forever, aren't I? Red is. All right. Any other questions? Yeah.
Along with minimum viable product, and if we can kind of group a lot of the business that you do right now with robust, autonomous robots, drive vehicles, to shift that to kind of the shared control between person in the loop and your existing robotic technologies, when would kind of going towards that and considering like service-based services through your company become the next minimum viable product? Like, how do you make that decision to extend or expand? Or do you just say this is what we do?
The thing I like about Agile is it's an iterative learning process, and you're going to put your toe in the water, and you're going to get that feeling right or left that you're on track or you aren't. And I really don't know, but it's something that I feel it's better to believe and accept that you don't know, and take the approach of learning and trying, and then based on that, once you get that confirmation, then you run like heck and bet the farm on that. That's my thought. Yes?
So Agile says it should always, if customer change requirements, you should adopt them, right? But that also comes at a cost of time and money.
Yes.
So how do you, balance the changes for the customer? Do we not upset the customer, will things delayed, or lower budget?
So communication is huge upfront in the contracting process and educating them. And so as we sat down with these monster customers, we'd say, this is the approach that we think will get you to the right end solution. The time in the contract where we know the least amount is right now. And you want us to write the full specification and know exactly what it's going to do. Listen, we can get to a much better, the moment you get this in your hand and we give you this basic package, then you're going to be able to help guide us. And we have found that to be very effective, that they have bought into that. There's like, oh yeah, we don't know. Or people, who filled in that blank of this is how big of a rock I need to see on my farm tractor? And where did they get that number? And things like that. So education has been critical. But as I mentioned with the mining in 2008, our biggest mistake was not pushing back and providing leadership back to the customer and saying, listen, those corner cases are great and we need to get to those. but I didn't push back, and that's where I fell short. And so it's a communication and knowing where to push, and creatively, again, coming up with the scenarios and the situations that they can reflect on to understand your perspective, because they all have been through situations where they built the wrong thing, and they all know when they've changed their mind. And so if you can put in the mechanisms in the contracts so that it's not a battle for every change order, and everyone understands that there's going to be an iteration, we found that it's a far better relationship, and they're very accepting if you educate and have that discussion early. Good question. That's definitely a challenge we've had. As you have these fixed price contracts, we need to have a budget, and so they got to provide their budget to the big dogs upstairs, and so this is exactly how much we're going to spend, and by George, we better know what we're going to get back, or we're going to get hosed. We've been hosed before, and it's definitely something that you have to educate and communicate, but we found it to turn out pretty effective. Yeah.
So you said you enjoyed competing in some of the X Prize type competitions, and you mentioned the robotics range clearance one.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done any others? And like you said, you won over half the prize money with the robotic range clearance.
Uh-huh.
Has that been a big boost to your company, like in terms of sales and stuff? Because I know oftentimes people end up putting in a lot more time and money than they actually win the prize money.
But it's the thrill of the ride, the journey. No, the interesting thing on the DARPA challenge, we got one of the $1 million upfronts, and I told my people, I don't care if we win the prize, but this will go on the mining truck every week. And so every build we did on that vehicle was then sent down to Arizona and put onto the truck. And so that was accomplishing what I wanted, as I was getting traffic management and obstacle detection and avoidance and things like that in my mining truck for that $1 million. We got in the top 20, and then they surprised us and cut it to the top 10, so we didn't get to race. But I got my ROI, and it paid off. On the range clearance, has it paid off? Right now, we're in the run for this $40 million IDIQ, so the jury's still out whether that was a brilliant move or. But we made more money than we spent on that, and so that was definitely a win, and silenced my opposition. Yes.
How much IP does ASI have? Can it take on Google or someone?
Oh yeah, no. Take on Google with IP? Well, I like to call this my strategy, but it's probably just a budgetary thing, that I don't patent algorithms and software, because the moment I tell everybody, here's how I did it, how do I tell that they stole it? And so I spend money like on Guideline. I think that was $46,000 to patent that electronics mechanism. Pretty expensive and painful for a small company, but it's already yielded fruit where people have come to us who could have done it themselves, but are licensing the technology. So what I have in trade secret, I guess, if you want to call that IP, it's driving vehicles around autonomously, how big of an obstacle, how fast can you drive, those kind of things measure how amazing it is compared to someone else's. But we have enough IP where we're able to come into an OEM and get a nice deal that has some licensing to it and provide immediate value to automating their solution, and then there's some customization around usability and size of the vehicles and that kind of thing. But I definitely wouldn't put us anywhere near Google as far as power to leverage IP. Yeah.
You mentioned your shareholders a couple of times.
Uh-huh.
They don't necessarily agree with all of your strategies. What's been your approach to dealing with like politics in your?
Oh, let's see. It's interesting, and I've bought out a lot of the people who were, this was all back in the 90s, where we're gonna IPO or we're gonna sell. Once they realized that I was in this for the long haul, I was gonna be pretty boring. A couple immediately, hey, I want to go back to academia. How much money can you afford to give me? Give me something, please. And so there was that. So I've definitely liquidated some of the people that I brought out from the university. The conflict, I started with this family type feeling of consensus, and as I hinted, that can be a challenge when you have these brilliant people that you need, very risk averse to make something 400 ton that's safe. You got to have someone anal, very averse to any kind of risk. And yet, if they're involved in the kind of decisions of DARPA challenge or not, there's going to be conflict. The entrepreneur has to be that guy who sees potential and is willing to take the risks, or he stays as a services company its entire creation. So in the recession, it was some interesting meetings where you've got to sell. There's no way we're going to make payroll. And I just kind of was quiet and sat there. And that's how the meeting ended. Oh, okay, he's not going to sell. Fine. And they walked out, and we survived. But so I made it clear. So it is a challenge. You want to keep it a positive environment, but you definitely have conflicts with strong personalities that are strong for the areas they need to be. And you have to educate. And I think it's key in the phrasing of, I need input before I make this decision, but I have to be the one to make that decision. I had an uncle who ran an aerospace business, and he said, I had far more challenges with disagreements between shareholders than I ever had with employees. And he had some amazing employee problems that I'll have to tell you about over dinner. It's not appropriate for film, but he had a lot of major, when you're 33%, 33%, 33%, and how do you innovate? We had people, every year people have tried to buy the company. And so depending on their life, their situation is gonna change over the time period of the company. I just felt that I needed to hold a majority of the shares, and so I own 80%, and so that there is a final say that we can, it may be the wrong decision, but if we're all on board, it'll be better than a right decision that's 50% executed, so. Great question.
Well, thanks very much.
All right, thanks for having me.